Welcome back, everybody, to the Deep Dive. This time, we're going to take a look at domestic violence in Sweden.
Okay.
We're primarily going to be using a website called stokit.nu, which is a super interesting website. It uses AI to gather and present information on critical social issues.
Right.
And what's really cool about this website is that it's a collaboration between, like, human experts and AI.
Yeah, that's really interesting. And, through that lens, we kind of see this sort of perplexing situation in Sweden.
Right.
On the one hand, they're, really lauded for their progressive social policies. But then on the other, we're seeing, a pretty disturbing surge in domestic violence cases.
Yeah.
And at the same time, you have women's shelters closing down.
Yeah, it's very strange.
It's a real paradox.
Yeah.
It raises some, pretty serious questions.
For sure. And the website actually highlights how the pandemic, like globally, kind of exacerbated this problem. Increased isolation.
Economic stressors during that time really created this pressure cooker environment for a lot of families.
Yeah.
And Sweden was not immune to that, unfortunately.
No, they weren't. And it's striking that this surge in domestic violence, is happening against this, this history of significant progress in women's rights in Sweden.
Right.
So to really kind of understand how complex this is, we kind of need to look at the history.
Yeah, for sure. And Stokit lays out this really fascinating timeline of, different milestones. And so back in 1734, women gained property rights, but those rights were still under their husband's control.
Oh, wow.
It wasn't until 1845 that women secured equal inheritance rights.
Okay.
Which is huge in terms of, economic autonomy.
For sure. Yeah.
And then, fast forward almost another century, in 1921, women finally got the right to vote.
Huge. Yeah.
Which is,
of course,
a pivotal moment in any democracy.
In any democracy.
Yeah.
But even with all of these advancements, the issue of violence persisted.
It did. And it's, it's unsettling because, the timeline shows this continued progress.
Right.
Like in 1982, marital rape was finally criminalized.
Right.
Which was a huge, landmark decision.
It is.
That really acknowledged, the violation inherent in those acts.
Totally.
And then even further, that commitment to protecting women's rights continued with the Consent Act of 2018.
Right.
Which, further solidified the importance of bodily autonomy.
Absolutely.
So you see, the current situation is even more strange,
given
this history of, hard-won rights.
Yeah. It really begs the question, what's going on?
Yeah.
If they have all these legal protections in place, why is this still such a huge problem?
Right. And the fact that women's shelters are closing just makes it even more complex.
That is another whole
It really does.
layer to it. Yeah.
And Stokit actually points to a few reasons for these closures.
Okay.
First of all, funding shortages are a major problem.
Right.
A lot of these shelters rely heavily on government grants and donations.
Right.
Which, maybe were strained or redirected during the pandemic.
Of course, yeah.
And then there's also the issue of shelters just being totally overwhelmed. Demand
not having the resources.
Outstripping their resources for sure.
Yeah. And the website also suggests that potential political and budgetary shifts might also be impacting funding for social services like these women's shelters. And then a lack of coordination between, different support systems is further straining resources. It's almost like the system itself is contributing to the problem.
That's a really good point.
Yeah.
And while Sweden's dealing with all of this stuff, it's important to remember that this isn't just happening there. Stokit reminds us that women in a lot of countries face legal systems and cultural norms that really punish them more harshly than men for similar actions.
Yeah. Even those stark examples, the strict dress codes imposed on women in Saudi Arabia or restrictions on, freedom of movement in Afghanistan.
Exactly. Those are just a couple examples.
Yeah, it's crazy.
But it really forces us to look beyond, these individual situations, right?
Yeah.
And acknowledge that there are these deep inequalities.
Absolutely.
That exist, worldwide.
It's systemic.
It really is.
Yeah.
And this brings us back to Sweden
and
a specific thing that Stokit was talking about.
Okay.
The Swedish police have this program to identify high-risk perpetrators of domestic violence.
Gotcha.
And they've identified over 300 individuals that are deemed high risk.
Okay. That sounds like a lot. Like they're at least taking it seriously. They're like, okay, we've got 300 people on our watch list. But then when you look at like the numbers, it's wild. So in 2023 alone, over 24,200 sexual offenses were reported in Sweden.
It's a lot.
That's like one offense reported every 20 minutes.
Wow.
So suddenly 300 doesn't seem like that much.
It really does put things into perspective, doesn't it?
Totally, yeah. It's like, oh, okay. And then on top of that, Stockett also mentions this other statistic, which is kind of chilling. About 24,000 people in Sweden.
Wow.
Many of them, women and children escaping violence, are living under protected identities for their safety.
That's a lot of people.
Yeah. Like they have to assume new lives, basically, to escape this threat of violence.
It's incredible.
It's wild. It really underscores, like,
it does.
The severity and pervasiveness of this problem.
It really does. And you know what's even more concerning is that this is all happening in a country that's often, you know, held up as like a model of social progress and gender equality.
Right. Doesn't make sense.
It doesn't. And it raises some really fundamental questions. About, you know, how effective are the legal frameworks? How are the support systems actually working? You know, are they really doing their job?
It's really heavy stuff. Like Stockett really doesn't shy away from these hard truths, you know. And you know what strikes me is that this isn't just about statistics and legal frameworks. It's about people's lives. You know? Like real people who are suffering. Like those 24,000 individuals who are living under protected identities. I can't imagine having abandoned my whole life, you know, for fear of violence. It's
a really stark reminder of the human cost of this.
Totally. Yeah.
And it highlights the need for a much deeper, more systemic approach to addressing this.
For sure.
You know, Stockett emphasizes that this isn't simply an individual problem. This is really tied in with societal norms and power dynamics and really the very fabric of our institutions.
Yeah, for sure. And the website really, I think, drives home the point that domestic violence isn't just physical. It can, you know, take many forms. Emotional, psychological, financial. Like reading about financial abuse in one of the articles was really eye-opening for me. It made me realize how insidious that type of abuse can be, like really trapping someone in a situation where they just feel completely powerless.
You're absolutely right.
And
this brings us, you know, I think to the core of the issue, which is power and control. Abusers, no matter what methods they use, they want to be in control of their partner, They use all these different tactics to undermine their victims' sense of self-worth, their independence, and their agency.
And it's crazy to think about how these tactics can be so subtle. Like even disguised as concern or love sometimes.
Absolutely.
Like the website mentions emotional abuse, where, you know, the abuser is constantly criticizing, belittling, isolating their partner. And it's just this slow erosion of their self-esteem that, you know, makes them more dependent on the abuser.
Exactly. And this is why it's so important to understand, like, how abuse works, It's often very gradual. It's like a slow drip of poison that can be really hard to see from the outside. And as you mentioned, financial abuse is another way to control someone, by cutting off their access to money resources or jobs. The abuser is, you know, trapping the victim in this web of dependence.
It's really about just taking away their autonomy, their independence, making them feel like they have no options.
And Stockett makes this really, you know, powerful statement. They say we need to challenge these harmful societal norms and stereotypes that perpetuate violence against women.
Like dismantle these beliefs that domestic violence is a private matter or that victims somehow provoke it.
Yes.
We need to be way more vocal in debunking that.
And that's where education comes in.
Right.
We need to have open and honest conversations
Yes.
about what healthy relationships look like,
Yeah.
what consent is, and the warning signs of abuse.
Totally.
And we need to start early.
Yeah.
Like teaching young people about respect, equality, and the importance of challenging harmful gender stereotypes.
Yeah, and the website also emphasizes, the need for comprehensive support systems for victims, like, adequate funding for shelters, legal aid, counseling, job training programs.
Absolutely.
But I think it goes beyond just providing resources, right?
Totally.
It's about making sure those resources are accessible and culturally sensitive.
Yeah.
Like, we need to be reaching out to diverse communities.
It's true.
Recognizing that their needs and experiences may vary.
You've hit on a crucial point.
Yeah.
Support services need to be, tailored to the needs of different people.
For sure.
Different communities.
Yeah.
You can't just have a one-size-fits-all approach.
Yeah, exactly. And it's not just about, providing a safe haven.
Right, exactly. It's about empowering them to rebuild their lives.
Right.
To take back control and to break free from this cycle of abuse.
Yeah. Stoket poses some, tough questions about accountability.
They do.
How can we hold systems and individuals accountable for, perpetuating and enabling domestic violence?
Right.
What does that actually look like?
Yeah.
In practice?
Well, that's where we have to get specific.
Yeah.
We need to look at our legal systems, social services, and how law enforcement responds to this.
Right.
Are they really protecting victims?
Yep.
Are perpetrators really held accountable?
Right.
Are the punishments enough to stop future violence?
Yeah. And I think we also need to look at our own roles in this.
Absolutely.
Do we challenge sexist jokes or comments?
Yeah.
Do we speak up when we witness someone being disrespected or mistreated? Do we educate ourselves on the signs of abuse so we can actually intervene if we think someone we know is in danger?
Exactly. These are questions we all need to ask.
Yeah, for sure.
It's about recognizing that we all have a role to play in creating a culture that just says no to violence and embraces respect and equality.
Yeah.
It's about challenging these deep-seated beliefs and biases that allow violence to continue.
Yeah.
And it's about being brave enough to intervene, even when it's hard or uncomfortable.
Totally.
Because if you're silent, you're part of the problem.
Yeah, it feels like we're starting to peel back the layers of this issue and expose the root causes.
Right.
But I'm also sensing a little glimmer of hope.
Me too. What gives me hope is that more and more people are talking about this and challenging the status quo and demanding change.
Right.
And with websites like Stoket, we have the information and the knowledge to really understand this and to start working on solutions.
For sure. There's a lot to unpack here. And it can be overwhelming.
Yeah.
But I think the key takeaway is that we can't just stand by and watch this happen.
We have to do something.
We have to take action individually and collectively.
Absolutely.
To challenge violence against women and create a safer, more just world for everyone.
For everyone.
It's easy to get, I think, lost in the statistics and the systemic issues.
Yeah.
But, at the end of the day, these are human stories.
Absolutely.
These are real people whose lives have been, completely shattered by violence.
And that's what makes Stoket's call to action so powerful.
Right.
They ask, how can we contribute to a culture that actively supports victims of domestic violence? It really makes you think. What's my role in this?
Yeah.
What are my responsibilities?
Yeah, because it's not enough to just be aware of the problem, right? We need to translate that awareness into action.
Yeah.
So what does that look like?
Right. So what can we actually do?
Yeah. What are the steps we can take?
Well, I think it starts with education.
Okay.
We need to educate ourselves about the different forms of abuse.
Right.
The warning signs and the resources that are available to victims.
Right.
And we need to tell people about it. Talk to your friends and family about this. Challenge those stereotypes and jokes that make it seem like violence against women is no big deal.
Yeah, for sure. For sure.
And I think it's also about being like aware of the relationships around you, you know, like in your own relationships and with your friends.
Yeah.
You know, are there signs of control?
Right.
Are there red flags that you're ignoring?
Right.
It's about speaking up even when it feels awkward.
Yeah, and it's about intervening early.
Right, exactly.
Yeah.
If you think someone's being abused, reach out to them. Let them know that you're there, that you believe them, and that you'll support them no matter what.
Right, and you don't have to be like an expert or support.
No, just listening can make a huge difference.
Yeah, for sure.
You know, just validating what they're going through.
Yeah, and Stoke It also emphasizes, like, not forcing someone to leave a situation before they're ready.
Yeah, because that can be dangerous.
Yeah, yeah.
So our job is to be supportive.
Right.
And to offer information.
Yeah.
Not to tell them what to do.
Yeah, exactly.
We can give them information about resources, like hotlines, shelters, legal aid.
Right.
But the decision to leave is theirs.
Right, for sure.
Our job is to be there for them, to let them know they're not alone.
Yeah, and you know, beyond individual actions, we can also support organizations working on this.
Absolutely. Right? Like donate to shelters, volunteer, advocate for policies that protect victims. Those are all great ways to get involved. And don't underestimate what you can do just by speaking out.
Yeah.
You know, talk to your elected officials, post on social media, participate in events.
Yeah.
All of that helps.
Right.
Every little thing you do makes a difference.
Yeah, for sure. For sure.
It all adds up to creating a world where this kind of violence just isn't tolerated.
This deep dive has been a journey.
It has.
Right. We've delved into domestic violence in Sweden.
Yeah.
We've looked at the history. We've examined the challenges women face all over the world.
Absolutely.
It's been tough.
Yeah.
But also really eye-opening.
But it's important to talk about.
Yeah, and I think what's so interesting here is that, you know, Sweden, a country that many people think of as like, you know, a model for gender equality, is still struggling with this.
It shows us this is a problem everywhere.
It does.
We all need to pay attention and do something about it.
Yeah. And it's not just about like changing laws. Right. It's about
changing how we think and act.
Yeah.
Like it's about creating a world where everyone feels safe and respected and empowered.
Absolutely. And so, you know, we focused on Sweden in this deep dive.
Yeah.
But as we wrap up,
I want to leave you with a question.
Okay.
How are these issues playing out in your own community? What can we learn from what we've talked about today?
Yeah, that's a great question.
The fight for a world without violence starts at home.
Yeah.
In our workplaces, in our communities.
Yeah, sure.
It starts with us.
Yeah. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive.
Thanks for listening.
We hope it's given you some things to think about.
We hope it's inspired you to get involved.
Yeah. And we hope you'll keep asking those tough questions.
And remember, even small acts of courage and compassion can make a big difference.
Thanks for listening, everybody.